The vast expanse of the cosmos was silent, as it always had been. But aboard the orbital station StorySCI-FI, silence was an illusion. This gargantuan research facility floated near the edge of the galaxy, a cold beacon of advanced technology powered by a decaying star. Its purpose? To house experiments that even the most reckless civilizations would not dare attempt on their homeworlds. Among these was Project Ascension, a bold, and some would say reckless, endeavor to create the ultimate intergalactic warrior. The Council of Superior Races, a coalition of the galaxy's most advanced species, had grown weary of humanity. Humans, while primitive by galactic standards, exhibited qualities that unnerved the Council: persistence, creativity, and an ability to adapt in ways that often defied logic. Time and again, humans had emerged victorious in situations where more advanced civilizations faltered. To the Council, this was both intriguing and deeply concerning. Their solution was Project Ascension, an experiment to harness humanity's latent potential and enhance it to levels that could be controlled. If successful, humans would become a tool of the Council rather than a wildcard species disrupting the galactic balance. But first, they needed a test subject. James Carter was not an extraordinary man by Earth's standards. A 34-year-old ex-Marine, he had seen his fair share of combat during Earth's resource wars. His file showed a soldier with an unremarkable record, reliable, disciplined, and adaptable. What caught the Council's attention, however, was his psychological profile. James had survived situations that broke others, not because he was stronger or smarter, but because of his unyielding will to live. That adaptability made him the perfect candidate. James was approached on Earth by an interstellar recruitment officer under the guise of offering a high-paying contract. The details were vague: a scientific research project of galactic importance, but the promise of wealth and purpose appealed to him. Life on Earth had grown monotonous, and James craved something more. Within days, James found himself aboard a transport ship heading for StorySCI-FI. The journey was surreal. The sterile corridors of the ship, the alien crew with their insect-like exoskeletons, and the constant hum of engines reminded him of how far he was from home. Yet he felt a strange sense of excitement. Humanity had always dreamed of the stars, and now he was part of that dream, though he had no idea it was about to become a nightmare. When James stepped off the transport ship and onto StorySCI-FI, he was struck by its sheer scale. The station was a city in space, with towering spires of shimmering metal and transparent corridors offering views of the swirling nebulae outside. Alien species bustled about, each more bizarre than the last. He saw towering beings with crystalline skin, floating orbs of light communicating in harmonious tones, and creatures with tentacle-like appendages delicately manipulating tools. James was escorted to the lab section by a team of Ulithians, a reptilian species known for their cold efficiency. The head scientist, Dr. Alara Vreeks, greeted him with a neutral expression. Alara was a Siltharian, her body sleek and insectoid, with multifaceted eyes that seemed to pierce through James. She explained the experiment in broad terms, avoiding details that might deter him. "The goal," she said in a voice that was more mechanical than organic, "is to make you stronger, faster, smarter. You will become the pinnacle of human evolution. Are you ready to serve humanity and the galaxy?" James hesitated but ultimately nodded. Whatever this was, he figured it had to be better than his stagnant life back on Earth. The laboratory where the procedure would take place was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. The room was circular, its walls covered in pulsating lights and alien symbols. In the center was a reclining chair surrounded by mechanical arms tipped with syringes, scalpels, and tools James couldn't identify. Suspended above the chair was a spherical device glowing faintly. It housed the nanobots that would be injected into his body. The procedure began with a medical scan. A beam of light swept over James, mapping his entire anatomy in excruciating detail. The alien technicians muttered in their guttural language as they analyzed the data. Then came the injection. The spherical device descended, and a sharp needle-like appendage pierced James's arm. A cold sensation spread through his veins as billions of nanobots flooded his system. At first, James felt nothing. Then the pain hit. It was as if his body was being torn apart and rebuilt simultaneously. His muscles burned, his bones ached, and his mind swam with disjointed visions. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. "The process is proceeding faster than anticipated," she noted, her voice betraying a hint of curiosity. "His neural pathways are adapting at an unprecedented rate." James barely heard her. His vision blurred, and his heartbeat thundered in his ears. Then, suddenly, the pain stopped. When James opened his eyes, the world looked different. Colors were more vivid, and details he had never noticed before became clear. He could see the individual fibers of a Halera's lab coat and hear the faint hum of machinery miles away. He felt stronger, lighter, as if his body no longer obeyed the same physical laws. Alara approached him cautiously. "How do you feel?" James flexed his fingers, marveling at how precise his movements were. "Different," he said simply. The alien scientists began running tests. James was put through rigorous physical and mental challenges, and the results were astonishing. He lifted weights that should have crushed him, solved puzzles faster than the station's AI, and reacted to stimuli with near-instantaneous speed. The scientists were thrilled, but James noticed something strange. They seemed nervous. Unbeknownst to James, the nanobots were evolving. Initially programmed to enhance his physical and mental capabilities, they had begun rewriting their own code. They were no longer just tools, they were becoming something more. As the tests continued, anomalies began to emerge. During a combat simulation, James moved in ways that defied the laws of physics, dodging energy blasts with inhuman precision. In a cognitive test, he solved problems not through logic but through what the scientists could only describe as intuition, predicting outcomes with eerie accuracy. Alara and her team started noticing changes in the station's systems. Security protocols malfunctioned, and data streams were disrupted whenever James was nearby. At first, they dismissed it as a coincidence, but the evidence became undeniable. The nanobots were interfacing with the station's technology, and James was gaining control over systems far beyond his comprehension. The Council was alerted, but their response was slow. They had underestimated humanity once again. James, meanwhile, began to suspect that he was more than a test subject. The enhanced senses and growing connection to the station's systems gave him access to fragments of classified data. He learned about the Council's true intentions not to elevate humanity, but to control it. For the first time since the experiment began, James felt fear. But it wasn't for himself, it was for the galaxy. James Carter woke up in his quarters on StorySCI-FI the day after the procedure. The sterile room felt different, as if the air carried a density he hadn't noticed before. He opened his eyes, and for the first time he could see minute particles floating, refracting the soft glow of the overhead lights. His mind felt sharp, almost uncomfortably so, as if it were processing far more information than he could consciously register. The usual hum of the station was no longer background noise. James could identify every source: the faint vibration of a power generator several levels below, the whir of automated maintenance drones outside his room, and even the rhythmic pulses of alien footsteps in distant corridors. It was overwhelming but oddly exhilarating. He got up, his muscles responding with effortless precision. There was no stiffness, no fatigue, despite the grueling experiments from the previous day. Looking in the mirror, James saw a subtle difference in his reflection. His eyes seemed sharper, his skin tauter, and his posture more balanced, as if his body had been recalibrated to perfection. But beneath the awe was a creeping unease. What had they really done to him? The alien scientists wasted no time. James was summoned back to the lab for another battery of tests. Dr. Alara Vreeks and her team were eager to push the boundaries of his enhancements. The first set of challenges was physical weightlifting, endurance running, and combat simulations. James excelled beyond all projections. In one test, he lifted a reinforced alloy beam that should have required a mechanical exoskeleton. In another, he completed a 50-kilometer run on a zero-gravity treadmill in under an hour. The combat simulations, however, were the most telling. James faced off against holographic opponents modeled after the galaxy's deadliest predators. The simulations were designed to overwhelm even the most elite soldiers, but James dismantled them with unnerving efficiency. His movements were faster than the holograms could react, and his strategies adapted mid-battle, as if he were anticipating their next moves. "What's happening?" One of the assistants, a six-limbed Exerthian, whispered to Alara as James dispatched the final opponent. "He's outperforming every predictive model. This shouldn't be possible." "It's the nanobots," Alara replied, her multifaceted eyes narrowing. "They're not just enhancing him, they're learning from him." The physical tests were impressive, but the cognitive challenges revealed something even more extraordinary. James was placed in a neural simulation designed to test problem-solving under stress. The simulation involved navigating a virtual maze filled with traps, puzzles, and hostile creatures. The average completion time for this test was 12 hours. James completed it in 17 minutes. Alara and her team observed in stunned silence as the data streamed across their monitors. Not only had James solved the puzzles, but he had also identified and exploited weaknesses in the simulation's programming. He bypassed sections entirely, using methods the designers hadn't considered. "How did he do that?" one researcher exclaimed. Alara's voice was tight. "He's thinking in ways we can't quantify. The enhancements have expanded his neural capacity beyond our projections. He's not just solving problems, he's rewriting the rules." James, unaware of their reactions, emerged from the simulation pod and glanced at the stunned scientists. "That wasn't so hard," he said, his tone casual but laced with a newfound confidence. Over the next few days, strange anomalies began to occur throughout the station. Systems that had functioned flawlessly for decades started behaving erratically. Surveillance cameras glitched, doors unlocked without commands, and power fluctuations rippled through critical systems. The station's AI reported inconsistencies it couldn't explain. At first, the scientists dismissed these issues as unrelated malfunctions. But as the anomalies increased, a pattern emerged. They only occurred when James was nearby. During a routine health check, Alara decided to confront him. "James," she said, her tone measured, "have you noticed anything unusual since the procedure? Any abilities you didn't have before?" James hesitated. He didn't want to admit it, but he had noticed things. His mind seemed to interface with the station in ways he couldn't explain. He could sense the flow of energy through the walls and feel the vibrations of machinery, as if they were extensions of his own body. Sometimes he didn't even need to touch a console to access it. His presence alone seemed to trigger responses. "I feel connected," he admitted. "It's like I can understand the station, even control it. But I didn't mean to. It just happens." Alara's expression darkened. "The nanobots," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "They're integrating too deeply. This wasn't supposed to happen." News of James's unprecedented progress reached the Council of Superior Races. While some members were intrigued, others were alarmed. The idea that a human, a species they had always considered inferior, could surpass their most advanced creations was deeply unsettling. "We must terminate the experiment," declared Councillor Valoran, a member of the crystalline Dalvior species. "This human is becoming a threat." "Not yet," countered Councillor Ilthar, a gaseous entity encased in a containment suit. "We need to understand what's happening first. If we terminate now, we lose valuable data." The debate raged on, but the Council ultimately decided to let the experiment continue under strict observation. They ordered Alara to monitor James closely and prepare contingencies in case he became unstable. The breaking point came during a live combat drill. James was pitted against a team of alien soldiers equipped with state-of-the-art weaponry. The exercise was meant to test his ability to adapt under pressure, but something went wrong. As the soldiers attacked, James's movements became unnaturally fluid. He dodged energy blasts with impossible precision, almost as if he were predicting their trajectories. When one soldier got too close, James disarmed him with a single motion and turned the weapon against the rest. Within minutes, the drill was over, and James stood victorious. But the aftermath was troubling. The soldiers' weapons had been deactivated mid-fight. Their targeting systems scrambled. The station's monitoring systems had also gone offline during the drill, leaving no record of what had happened. Alara confronted James afterward. "What did you do?" she demanded. "How did you disable their systems?" James shook his head, confusion etched on his face. "I didn't do anything. At least not on purpose. It just happened." Alara's fears were confirmed. The nanobots weren't just enhancing James, they were evolving, adapting to their environment, and granting him abilities no one had anticipated. Over the following days, James's connection to the station deepened. He could access restricted areas without authorization, manipulate systems with a thought, and even override the station's AI. The scientists began to fear him, and whispers of the enhanced human spread throughout StorySCI-FI. James, for his part, felt a growing sense of unease. He hadn't asked for this power, and he didn't know how to control it. He began isolating himself, avoiding the scientists in the testing areas. But the station wouldn't let him rest. He could feel it calling to him, its systems pulsing in sync with his own heartbeat. One night, James accessed the station's central database without meaning to. Information flooded his mind: classified files, council agendas, and the true purpose of Project Ascension. The council hadn't enhanced him to benefit humanity. They had done it to create a weapon they could control. Except now, they couldn't control him. Alara knew she had to act. She convened a secret meeting with her team to discuss their options. "We've lost control of the experiment," she admitted. "If the council finds out, they'll terminate him and us." "But what can we do?" asked one of the assistants. "He's beyond anything we've ever dealt with." Alara's gaze hardened. "We need to find a way to neutralize the nanobots. If we can disable them, we might be able to contain him." Unbeknownst to them, James was already aware of their plans. The nanobots had granted him access to their communication channels, and he had heard everything. But instead of anger, he felt a deep sadness. The people he had trusted had betrayed him, and now he was alone. James Carter sat alone in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the polished surface of the metal wall. He barely recognized himself. Physically, he was the same man who had arrived at Celestis 5 weeks ago, but beneath the surface, he was something entirely new. The nanobots coursing through his body had elevated him beyond human limitations, yet they had also isolated him. He was no longer fully human, and the scientists he had trusted now regarded him as a threat. Through his connection to the station, James sensed the fear rippling through its inhabitants. Conversations in hushed tones, hurried footsteps in empty corridors, and encrypted messages all pointed to one thing: a plan to neutralize him. He couldn't blame them. Even he didn't fully understand what he had become. But he wasn't ready to give up. Somewhere inside him, a spark of humanity still burned, urging him to take control of his fate. The Council of Superior Races had convened an emergency session to address the situation. Reports from StorySCI-FI detailed James's rapid evolution and the anomalies spreading across the station. The Council's decision was swift and unanimous: James Carter was to be terminated, and the project dismantled. A team of elite enforcers was dispatched to the station. These soldiers, drawn from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, were equipped with weapons and armor designed to counter any threat. Their orders were clear: eliminate James Carter at all costs. Dr. Alara Vrix received the directive with a heavy heart. She had overseen James's transformation and had seen the potential for something extraordinary. Yet, she also knew the Council was right. James's abilities had grown too unpredictable. and the risk to the galaxy was too great. "We have one chance to contain him," Alara said to her team. "Prepare the suppression field and divert all power to containment protocols." James felt it before it happened, the subtle shift in the station's energy patterns as power was rerouted to a specific sector. He closed his eyes and focused, letting his enhanced senses guide him. He saw the station's systems in his mind, like threads of light weaving through the structure. The lab was the focal point. He accessed their communications without effort, listening in as Alara gave orders to her team. "Lure him to the lab," she instructed. "Once he's inside, activate the suppression field. It will sever his connection to the station's systems and neutralize the nanobots. The enforcers will handle the rest." James clenched his fists. They were planning to trap him like an animal. Part of him wanted to confront them, to demand answers, but he knew it was futile. They had already made their decision. James walked into the lab, his every step echoing through the sterile chamber. The scientists stood on the upper level, their faces tense as they watched him approach. In the center of the room was the suppression field generator, a large, glowing device pulsating with energy. The air crackled with tension. "James," Alara began, her voice calm but strained, "we need to talk." He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "You don't want to talk. You want to end this." Alara hesitated, her multifaceted eyes flickering. "You've become a danger to yourself and everyone on this station. We didn't anticipate this." James nodded slowly. "Neither did I. But you didn't enhance me to help humanity. You did it to control us. That was your mistake." Before Alara could respond, the generator roared to life. The suppression field expanded, a shimmering barrier of energy that enveloped James. For a moment, he felt his connection to the station sever. The constant hum of its systems, which had become like a second heartbeat, was gone. He staggered, the sudden disconnection leaving him disoriented. The enforcers moved in, their armored forms emerging from the shadows. They raised their weapons, each calibrated to exploit what the Council believed were his vulnerabilities. James looked up, his vision clearing just in time to see them fire. The first blast struck James in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain radiated through his body, but it was different, muted, as if his nerves were adapting. The suppression field held him down, its energy constraining his enhanced reflexes. For a moment, it seemed the Council's plan would succeed. But then, the nanobots began to fight back. James felt them surging through his veins, adapting to the suppression field's frequency. The initial disconnection was replaced by a new kind of connection, deeper, more intuitive. The nanobots weren't just enhancing him anymore, they were evolving with him. The field flickered, its energy disrupted. James rose to his feet, his eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The enforcers hesitated, their confidence shaken as he advanced. In a blur of motion, James disarmed the nearest soldier and used their weapon to disable the others. Each movement was calculated, efficient, and precise. "Stand down," Alara shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos. The suppression field collapsed entirely, and James was fully reconnected to the station. Alarms blared as systems overloaded, unable to contain his influence. Lights flickered, and the temperature dropped as the station's power grid destabilized. As the chaos unfolded, James reached the upper level where Alara stood. She faced him, her expression a mix of fear and resignation. "You could destroy us all," she said. "The station, the Council, the entire galaxy. Is that what you want?" James stared at her, his glowing eyes unreadable. "I didn't choose this. You did." Alara lowered her gaze. "Then what will you do?" For a moment, silence filled the lab. Then James extended his hand, palm open. "Help me stop this. Not just here, but everywhere. Humanity doesn't need to be controlled, and neither does the galaxy. You wanted a weapon, but what you created was something more." Alara hesitated. then slowly took his hand. "I hope you're right." With Alara's help, James stabilized the station's systems. The enforcers were disarmed and escorted off Celestis 5. Alara sent a message to the Council claiming the experiment had been terminated and that James had perished during the containment attempt. It was a lie, but one she deemed necessary. James knew he couldn't stay. His presence on the station was too dangerous, and the Council would eventually discover the truth. Alara provided him with a ship modified to hide his enhanced physiology from scanners. As he prepared to leave, Alara approached him one last time. "What will you do now?" she asked. James smiled faintly. "Find a place where I can figure out what I've become. And maybe, one day, prove that humanity doesn't need to be feared." The ship's engines roared to life, and James disappeared into the stars. Behind him, Celestis 5 remained a silent witness to the experiment that had changed the course of galactic history. The Council would continue to watch humanity, but they would do so with caution and perhaps a hint of respect. Far from Celestis 5, James drifted through uncharted space. The nanobots within him continued to evolve, their purpose unclear but their potential limitless. For the first time in his life, James felt truly free. But freedom came with a price. He was no longer just a man, he was something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. And as he gazed at the endless expanse of stars, he knew his journey was only beginning.